A former Navy SEAL thought he was simply buying an abandoned workshop beside a frozen northern lake to rebuild his life. But during the auction, a mysterious man became desperate to stop him from winning the property.
Just as you predicted.
The entire town called the architect who once owned the workshop crazy after his son died in a mysterious bridge accident years earlier. Then the Navy SEAL's German Shepherd started reacting to a wall that should not have existed inside the building. Behind it was a secret, powerful men had buried for nearly a decade, along with a truth that could have killed an entire town. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Help us reach 1,000 followers so we can continue creating more meaningful stories together. Now, let's begin the story. The road into Pine Hollow Ridge curved along the frozen edge of Blackwater Lake, like a scar that had learned how to shine. Late afternoon light spilled across the snow in pale silver bands, turning the pine forests into long walls of shadow and gold. Ethan Calder drove slowly through it all, with both hands resting lightly on the steering wheel of his aging dark green pickup, the heater rattling softly beneath the dashboard. Beside him, Ranger sat upright in silence. The German Shepherd was 6 years old now, large and lean, bred from working bloodlines instead of show lines. Cream-gray fur ran along his body, beneath a darker saddle of black over his back and ears. Time and hard winters had lightly silvered the fur around his muzzle, but there was nothing slow about him. His amber eyes moved constantly, reading roads, trees, movement, people. Ranger did not bark unnecessarily. He watched first, judged second. Ethan trusted that more than most human instincts. The town appeared through the trees gradually, warm lights glowing against snowbanks, wood smoke curling from chimneys, small storefronts painted in faded blues and reds that looked older than the highway leading to them. Pine Hollow Ridge was beautiful in the way northern towns sometimes were. Not polished, not rich, but stubbornly alive. It felt far away from war. That was the point. Ethan was 35 years old, tall at a little over 6 feet, with the compact build of someone shaped by endurance instead of vanity. Nothing about him looked theatrical. No oversized muscles, no swagger. Just controlled strength that had settled into his bones after years of carrying too much weight in too many places. His dark brown hair was cut short in a military style, slightly longer than regulation, and his clean-shaven face exposed a square jaw and sharp cheekbones, weathered by northern cold and desert heat alike. His gray-blue eyes carried the alert stillness of someone who never fully stopped scanning exits. He wore the same clothes he had worn through 3 states and almost 11 months of drifting. An old military gray tactical combat shirt softened with age, faintly frayed at the shoulders and cuffs. A dark red thermal layer visible beneath the collar. Worn combat pants the color of moss and earth. Old military work boots, and the scratched black watch he still wound every night out of habit. The military had taught him discipline. Grief had taught him silence. Ahead, a faded wooden sign emerged from the snow. Whitmore Industrial Workshop. County auction today. Ethan exhaled slowly. This is it, buddy. Ranger's ears twitched once. The auction was already gathering when Ethan arrived. About 20 people stood near the rusted chain-link fence surrounding the property. Pickup trucks lined the roadside beneath tall pines. Most people carried the look small northern towns often shared: heavy coats, weathered skin, eyes that measured strangers before offering warmth. And nearly all of them looked at the workshop like it was cursed. The building stood near the frozen edge of the lake, broad and rectangular beneath a weather-beaten steel roof. Time had worn the place hard. Snow clung to the gutters. One exterior floodlight hung crooked. The garage doors carried streaks of rust. But Ethan noticed something else immediately. The structure was still standing perfectly level. No major settling, no foundational shift. The support beams aligned correctly even after decades of winter pressure. Whoever built it had known exactly what they were doing. Ranger jumped down from the truck and landed quietly in the snow. Several people instinctively stepped back at the sight of him, but the dog ignored them. He moved toward the workshop slowly, nose working against the cold air. An older man near the fence muttered, "Dog's smarter than most folks if he stays away from that place." Ethan glanced toward him. "Why's that?" The man shrugged beneath a thick plaid coat. "Whitmore Place. Bad memories." Another voice added, "Owner lost his son there." "Not there," someone corrected quietly. "At the bridge site." The conversations died quickly after that, as if mentioning the Whitmore family too long made people uncomfortable. The auctioneer finally climbed onto the back of a flatbed trailer and began speaking through a portable microphone while snow drifted lightly around the crowd. Ethan only half listened. His attention stayed on the workshop. The geometry felt wrong somehow. Not visually, instinctively. Years ago, in another country, Ethan had survived because he noticed tiny inconsistencies inside buildings. Walls thicker than they should have been, doors slightly off-center, unusual airflow beneath debris. The men who failed to notice those things did not come home. And something about this place whispered the same quiet warning. Ranger suddenly stopped moving. The dog stood near the eastern wall of the workshop, body rigid. Not aggressive, listening. Ethan's stomach tightened slightly. Ranger lowered his head toward the concrete foundation and released a low sound deep in his throat. Not a growl, not fear exactly. Recognition. Like he smelled something old beneath the cold. The auction continued. Most bidders ignored the workshop entirely. A few offered low numbers with obvious reluctance. Then another bidder entered the rhythm calmly through a man in an expensive dark coat standing near a black SUV parked farther uphill. Ethan noticed him immediately. The man was tall and narrow-shouldered with carefully groomed gray-black hair and pale skin untouched by outdoor work. Even from a distance, he looked expensive. Cashmere coat, black gloves, sharp posture. The kind of man who smiled without warmth reaching his eyes. Victor Dane. Ethan didn't know the name yet, but he knew the type. Men like that existed everywhere. Men who never carried boxes themselves. Men who built empires by standing far enough from damage that no blood ever reached their shoes. The bidding rose unexpectedly for several minutes. Not aggressively, carefully, controlled. Too controlled. The expensive man's representative kept increasing bids just enough to discourage locals without drawing attention. Interesting. Ethan raised his own bid calmly. The representative answered immediately, so Ethan raised it again. The man near the SUV finally looked directly at him for the first time. Cold eyes. Calculating eyes. And for one brief second, Ethan felt the strange sensation that this man did not care about the workshop itself. He cared about who owned it. The bidding climbed another 2 rounds before the representative suddenly stopped. The auctioneer called once, twice. Sold. The crowd dispersed quickly after that, muttering beneath clouds of frozen breath. Some shook Ethan's hand politely. Others looked at him with sympathy, usually reserved for terminal patients. One elderly woman quietly said, "Jonas Whitmore was a good man before the grief got him." Then she walked away before Ethan could ask more. The sun had nearly disappeared by the time Ethan unlocked the chain fence and approached the workshop properly. Up close, the building felt even stranger. The steel exterior was scarred by years of weather, but the foundational concrete remained unnaturally solid. Ethan crouched near one corner and brushed away snow with his glove. precision cuts, reinforced anchors. This had not been built cheaply. Ranger walked ahead toward the eastern wall again, then stopped. The dog's posture changed instantly. Ears forward, weight shifted. Stillness. Ethan felt his pulse slow automatically, the old operational instincts returning before he consciously noticed them. "What is it?" Ranger stared at the wall, not barking, not moving. The wind moved through the pine trees above the lake with a hollow, whispering sound. Then Ethan saw it. Footprints. Fresh ones, near the back entrance. Someone had been here recently. Very recently. The snow inside the tracks remained sharp-edged, untouched by new snowfall. Ethan stood slowly. Ranger released another low growl. That was when Ethan noticed the cigarette smell lingering faintly beneath the cold air. Not old, current. Someone had been watching the workshop. Maybe still was. Ranger suddenly turned away from the wall and faced the dark tree line uphill. The dog's entire body stiffened. Not fear. Target acquisition. Ethan followed his gaze instinctively. For half a second he saw movement between the trees, a human silhouette stepping behind a pine trunk too quickly to be natural. Watching them. Then gone. The lake wind carried silence back across the property, but Ethan no longer felt like a man who had purchased an abandoned workshop. He felt like a man who had walked into the middle of something unfinished. And somewhere inside the old building behind him, the walls seemed to hold their breath. He entered through the side door carefully, flashlight in hand. The smell hit him first. Cold steel, dust, motor oil soaked deep into old concrete. And beneath it all, aged pine sawdust lingering like a memory that refused to die. The interior was enormous. Workbenches lined the far wall beneath hanging industrial lamps. Rusted tools still rested in careful rows. Unlike most abandoned buildings, this place did not feel chaotic. It felt paused, like someone had expected to return. Ethan moved slowly through the workshop, while Ranger padded silently beside him. The beam of his flashlight swept across welding equipment, old drafting tables, shelves stacked with labeled bolts and hardware. Everything organized, everything deliberate. A large drafting board stood near the rear office, covered by a dust sheet. Ethan pulled the cloth back gently. Blueprints. Dozens of them. Bridge structures, load calculations, foundation sketches. Whoever Jonas Whitmore had been, he hadn't just repaired buildings. He had designed things meant to carry lives safely across dangerous places. Ethan stared at the blueprints longer than he expected. An old memory surfaced without warning. Concrete dust filling his lungs overseas, twisted steel collapsing inward, one of his teammates screaming beneath debris Ethan could not move in time. He shut the memory down hard. Not here. Not anymore. This place was supposed to be different. A place where things got repaired instead of destroyed. Ranger suddenly moved away from him again. The dog returned to the eastern wall. Slowly this time, then sat directly beside it, watching Ethan. Waiting. The flashlight beam swept across the steel surface. Nothing obvious. No door. No seams. Still, Ethan stepped closer. Something about the dimensions bothered him. The wall extended too far relative to the exterior shape he remembered outside. Not much, maybe inches, but enough. Enough for instinct to wake fully. Ethan rested one gloved hand against the cold metal surface. Solid. But behind the steel, buried somewhere beneath years of silence and dust and northern winters. He felt the unmistakable weight of a question waiting to be answered. Outside, snow began falling harder across Pine Hollow Ridge, and somewhere beyond the frozen lake, a truck engine started briefly in the dark before disappearing into the night. Morning came to Pine Hollow Ridge with a brightness that felt almost too gentle for the unease Ethan Calder had carried through the night. Snow lay clean across the roof of the old Whitmore workshop, softening every hard edge, turning rust into silence and broken things into shapes that could almost be forgiven. Beyond the property, Blackwater Lake held the pale sky in its frozen skin. Pines stood along the shoreline like patient witnesses, their dark branches heavy with white. Ethan had slept only 3 hours, not because the building had groaned in the cold, though it had, not because Ranger had paced twice between the side door and the eastern wall, though he had. Ethan had slept poorly because the workshop felt less like an abandoned property and more like a sealed mouth. And he had spent enough of his life around silence to know when it was natural. This silence was not. By 7, he had brewed bitter coffee on a small camp stove and opened the side bay door to let in the thin winter light. Ranger lay near the threshold, his cream-gray body stretched across the concrete, black harness trimmed in dark red still buckled around him. The German shepherd's amber eyes followed every movement outside, without wasting energy on drama. To anyone else, he might have looked calm. Ethan knew better. Ranger was guarding. "New life," Ethan muttered, lifting a toolbox from the truck bed. "Remember that? Quiet garage. Honest work. Maybe one day a chair that doesn't fold." Ranger blinked once. "Don't judge me. You still sleep on military-grade padding." The joke landed in the empty workshop and vanished among old beams. Ethan started with practical things. He cleared broken boards from the main floor, tested outlets, marked cracked insulation, and swept years of dust into gray piles. The labor steadied him. There was mercy in work done by hand. A screw either turned or stripped. A board either held or split. Machines complained honestly. Buildings, if read carefully, did too. The old workshop continued to trouble him. Its proportions seemed right from the outside, yet wrong once he moved within it. The eastern wall pulled at his attention, as if some hidden gravity lived behind it. He forced himself not to rush. Rushing was how men missed tripwires, unstable beams, and the kind of small detail that decided who went home. Near noon, an old blue Subaru stopped outside the fence. Ranger lifted his head. A woman stepped out carrying a cardboard tube under one arm and a cloth bag over her shoulder. She paused at the gate as if approaching a grave. She looked to be in her early 30s, tall and slender, with chestnut brown hair tied low at the nape of her neck. Her skin was fair in the winter way, pale but not fragile, and her eyes were a gray blue that caught Ethan's attention immediately because they looked familiar, though he had never seen her before. They had the same tired clarity the old workshop seems to have. She wore a cream turtleneck beneath a long blue-gray wool coat, dark jeans tucked into simple winter boots, and a wine-red scarf wrapped once around her throat. She was composed, but not comfortably so. Her fingers tightened around the cardboard tube like it was either a weapon or a confession. "Mr. Calder?" she asked. "Ethan is fine." "I'm Mara Bellamy." She glanced past him toward the building. "Jonas Whitmore was my grandfather." Ranger stood then, not threatening, but fully present. Mara noticed him and went still. "That's Ranger?" Ethan's eyes narrowed slightly. "You know his name?" "The auctioneer mentioned a man with a German shepherd bought the place." A faint, sad smile touched her face. "Small towns don't keep secrets well. They only keep the important ones badly. Ethan opened the gate. Ranger approached her first. He sniffed the air near her coat, then her gloves, then stepped back and sat. Not friendly exactly, accepting. Mara looked at him with a softness that seemed to surprise even herself. He looks like he understands more than people want him to. He usually does. That must be inconvenient. Frequently. For the first time, Mara almost laughed. It did not last long. Inside the workshop, she moved carefully, her eyes traveling over benches, hooks, drafting tools, shelves. Not like a stranger inspecting a building, like someone entering an old argument she had avoided for years. My grandfather used to keep this place open during storms, she said quietly. People forget that now. Or maybe they choose to. Ethan said nothing. Silence often pulled better truth from people than questions did. He fixed generators for widows, built ramps for veterans who couldn't pay, let boys from the high school come here after they got in trouble, taught them how to sand wood until they stopped wanting to punch walls. She ran her hand along a scarred workbench. When I was little, I thought he was some kind of mountain wizard, always covered in sawdust, always smelling like cedar and coffee. What changed? Mara's hand stopped moving. My Uncle Noah died, she swallowed. After that, people said grief broke something in him. The name hung in the cold air. Noah. Ethan filed it away. Mara set the cardboard tube on the drafting table and removed several rolled sheets. I found these in my mother's attic after the auction. I almost threw them out. Then I thought. She looked at the workshop walls. Maybe whoever bought this place should have them. Ethan unrolled the first blueprint carefully. The paper was old, but well preserved, edges yellowed, lines still crisp. The title block read, Whitmore Industrial Workshop, Original Structural Plan. Jonas Whitmore's signature sat in the lower corner, clean and deliberate. Ethan leaned over the drawing. Something inside him sharpened. The plan showed the workshop's full width, bay placements, support columns, office, storage wall, utility chase. It was elegant, efficient, strong, and wrong. Not on paper. In the room. Ethan took out a tape measure first, then the laser measure from his toolbox. He moved from western interior wall to eastern interior wall once, twice, a third time. Mara watched him, face tightening. What is it? Ethan looked back at the blueprint. The outside width matches this plan. How do you know? I measured last night and again this morning. Her brow creased. And inside? Inside is short. How short? He checked the laser again, though he already knew. Almost 6 feet. Mara's lips parted slightly. That's impossible. No, Ethan said, looking toward the eastern wall where Ranger had gone still again. It's deliberate. Ranger rose before either of them moved. The dog crossed the workshop slowly and stopped at the eastern wall. Instead of growling, he lowered his head and pressed his nose to a narrow seam near the floor, so faint it looked like a shadow made by age. Then he did something Ethan had not seen him do since Afghanistan. Ranger lay down flat, placed one ear against the concrete, and listened. Mara whispered, "What is he doing?" Ethan did not answer at first, because in the old days, Ranger had done that near buried voids, empty rooms, hidden passages, places where air moved where no air should have been moving. The workshop seemed to shrink around them, and for one impossible second, Mara looked at the wall not with fear, but with recognition, as if some part of her had always known her grandfather had left one last room inside the world. Ethan crouched beside Ranger and held his hand near the seam. Cold air touched his fingertips. Faint, almost nothing, but real. Mara stepped closer, her boots whispering over dust. My grandfather used to say that. What? That walls don't lie. Her voice trembled despite her effort to steady it. Only people measure wrong. Ethan looked back at the blueprint, then at the wall. Maybe he wasn't talking about philosophy. For the next hour, they worked without tearing anything open. Ethan photographed the blueprint, marked measurements, inspected floor plates, traced electrical conduit. The more he checked, the clearer the deception became. The eastern wall was not load-bearing in the way it pretended to be. Someone had built a second skin inside the original structure, cleanly enough that casual eyes would never question it. Could your grandfather have built this later? Ethan asked. Mara nodded slowly. Yes, he could build anything. That was the problem. The problem? People came to him when they needed things fixed. Houses, roofs, permits, lives. He could look at a room and know where it was weak. Her face tightened. After Noah died, he started saying the whole town had weak beams. Ethan understood that kind of sentence. People called men unstable when grief gave them accuracy no one wanted to hear. What happened to Noah? He asked. Mara folded her arms around herself. He was 29, structural engineer, worked with my grandfather sometimes. He died at a construction site near Haven Ridge. Scaffold collapse, they said. Her voice dropped. But Grandpa said Noah had found something before he died. Something about the Winter Bridge project. No one believed him. Why not? Because Sheriff Keene said there was no evidence. Victor Dane's people said Grandpa was trying to blame someone because he couldn't accept an accident. And after a while, she looked down. Shame moved across her face like a cloud crossing water. After a while, even family gets tired of being afraid of another person's grief. Ethan did not soften the silence for her. Some truths deserved to stand on their own feet. Mara wiped quickly beneath one eye, angry at the tear rather than broken by it. I stopped coming here. I was 24 and stupid enough to think pain was embarrassing if it lasted too long. You were young. He was alone. Outside, a vehicle approached along the snowy lane. Ranger stood instantly. A black SUV rolled to a stop beyond the fence. Mara's expression changed before Ethan even turned. Her shoulders drew back, her mouth became still, and fear hid itself behind politeness. That's Victor Dane, she said. The man from the auction stepped out into the pale afternoon light. Up close, Victor Dane looked almost carefully manufactured. Late 40s, tall, lean, clean-shaven, with gray-black hair combed into place so precisely that the wind seemed reluctant to disturb it. His charcoal cashmere coat fell perfectly over a black turtleneck and dark trousers. His leather gloves were spotless. Even his winter boots looked too clean for the road he had driven. He smiled at Ethan through the fence. It was a beautiful smile. It carried no warmth at all. "Mr. Calder," Victor called. "I hoped we might speak." Ethan walked outside but did not invite him in. Ranger came with him and stopped at his left side. Victor's eyes flicked briefly to the dog. Just briefly. But Ethan saw the dislike there. "I understand you're planning to renovate," Victor said. "Ambitious. This property has frustrated better-funded men than either of us." "Buildings don't frustrate me much." "How fortunate." Victor gave a soft laugh. "I'll be direct. I'm prepared to offer you 3 times what you paid yesterday." Mara had followed them out, but stayed near the open bay door. Victor noticed her, and his expression shifted into something almost paternal. "Mara, I'm surprised to see you here." Her chin lifted. "I brought Ethan the original plans." For the first time, Victor's smile paused. Only half a second. Enough. "Did you?" he said. Ethan felt Ranger's body tense beside him. Victor looked back at Ethan. "Old paper can be misleading. Jonas altered things constantly near the end. His mind was not what it had been." Mara's face hardened. "His mind was fine." Victor sighed gently, as if forgiving a child. "Grief makes loyal historians of us all." Ethan had known men like Victor in war rooms and embassy halls, men who could turn cruelty into courtesy so smoothly that other people thanked them for the wound. "The workshop isn't for sale," Ethan said. Victor studied him. "Everything is for sale, Mr. Calder. Especially peace. I already bought what I came for." "And what was that?" Ethan glanced back at the building, at the wall Ranger had chosen, at the blueprint still spread across the drafting table inside. "A place to rebuild." Victor's eyes cooled. "Then I hope you know what you're rebuilding on." He returned to his SUV without another word. No threat, no raised voice. That made it worse. When the vehicle disappeared down the lane, Mara released a breath she had been holding. "He scares people without needing to sound scary," she said. "Those are usually the ones worth watching." Ethan went back inside and rolled the blueprints carefully. His life had been supposed to become smaller here, quieter. Workbench, wood smoke, Ranger sleeping near the heater. Maybe neighbors who waved from trucks. Maybe enough peace that the dead stopped walking behind his eyes every night. Instead, he had bought a workshop with a missing 6 feet inside it, a dead architect whose grief might have been warning, a bridge project tied to a dead son, and a powerful man too eager to purchase silence. Ranger returned to the eastern wall and sat again. Ethan looked at Mara. "I'm going to need more measurements." She nodded. "And everything you remember your grandfather saying about this place." Mara's eyes moved to the wall. For the first time since she arrived, fear was not the strongest thing in her face. Hope was. Small, painful, dangerous, but alive. "Then we should start with the sentence he repeated the week before he died," she said. Ethan waited. Mara looked at the blueprint in his hands. "He said, 'If anyone ever finds the space I stole from my own building, tell them I didn't steal it. I saved it.'" Ethan looked toward the eastern wall. Ranger's ears tilted forward, as if the old building had whispered back. And in that bright northern afternoon, with snow shining beyond the open bay door, Ethan understood that his quiet garage had just become something else entirely. Not a business, not a shelter, a map. By late afternoon, the workshop had begun to feel less abandoned and more awake. Ethan Calder did not like that feeling. Buildings did not wake. People did. Dogs did. Old grief did sometimes if someone stepped too close to where it had been buried. But concrete, steel, and pine beams were supposed to remain neutral. They held weight. They resisted weather. They did not watch a man from the corners of their own shadows. Still, as Ethan moved through the Whitmore workshop with a flashlight clipped to his shoulder and a pry bar in one hand, he felt the place shifting around him. Not physically, not in any way another person could measure, but in that deeper animal part of the mind trained by danger. Ranger felt it too. The German shepherd paced the main floor with his nose low, harness brushing faintly against his cream-gray fur. The dark red trim along the black straps looked almost ceremonial in the cold light, as if the dog wore the mark of some old guardian order. His amber eyes did not rest. He moved from the eastern wall to the center of the floor, then toward the rear bay, then back again. Mara Bellamy stood near the drafting table, the original blueprints rolled carefully beside her. She had not left after Victor Dane's visit. Some part of her seemed afraid that if she walked away now, she might lose courage again, the way she believed she had lost it years ago with her grandfather. "I keep thinking about what he said," she murmured. Ethan knelt near a floor plate and examined the bolts. "Jonas?" Mara nodded. "That he saved the space. Not hid it. Saved it." There was a difference. Ethan understood that. A man hid something for himself. A man saved something for someone else. The old floor was a patchwork of concrete slabs, drain channels, old oil stains, and lighter squares where heavy machines had once stood. Near the center bay, Ethan noticed a section that did not match the rest. It was subtle, too subtle for a casual eye. The concrete there had been poured later, but whoever did it had aged the surface carefully. Dust, stain, scuff marks, even shallow tool scratches. Someone had wanted it to look forgotten. Ethan set his palm flat against the slab. It was colder than the surrounding floor. Ranger suddenly stopped pacing. The dog's head turned, slowly. Then he came forward, not rushing, not uncertain. He placed one paw on the concrete patch and began to sniff along its edge. His breathing changed, short and deliberate. Ethan watched every movement. Ranger had done this near buried ammunition, sealed containers, and once beside a collapsed wall where a man was still alive beneath 3 feet of rubble. "What is it?" Mara whispered. Ethan did not answer. He took a small rubber mallet from his tool bag and tapped the slab. The sound came back dull. He tapped 6 inches away. Different. Not hollow exactly. Shielded. "There's something under this," Ethan said. Mara's face lost color. It took nearly an hour to open the floor. Ethan did not smash. Smashing destroyed evidence. Instead, he drilled small pilot holes along the edges of the patch and found the outline of a rectangular cut beneath the thin top layer. Jonas had not simply buried something. He had created an access panel beneath concrete skin. The workmanship was beautiful. Even in concealment, the old architect had been precise. Ethan used a masonry blade slowly, the dust rising white-gray into the cold air. Mara opened the bay door wider to ventilate, but she did not step outside. She held a flashlight for him, hands steady only because she forced them to be. When the panel finally lifted, Ranger backed away once, then leaned forward again. Inside the shallow cavity sat a steel box wrapped in tarred cloth. No rust, no moisture damage, no accident. Ethan stared at it for a moment before touching it. He had seen men open things too quickly because curiosity overpowered caution. Some had lost fingers. Some had lost more. He checked the cavity edges, the underside of the lid, the surrounding concrete. No wires, no pressure trigger, no chemical smell beyond old metal and oil. Only then did he lift the box free. It was heavier than it looked. Mara whispered, "Did my grandfather put that there?" Someone careful did. On the workbench, Ethan cut away the tarred cloth. Beneath it was a waterproof steel case with an old combination lock. A strip of yellowed masking tape had been fixed to the top. Written on it in faded black marker were 3 words: "For the honest." Mara covered her mouth. Ethan felt something tighten behind his ribs. Not fear, recognition. Dead men sometimes left messages like that when they no longer trusted the living. The lock took time. Not because it was complicated, but because Ethan refused to force it until he had tried the obvious. Mara, pale and trembling, suggested dates. Jonas's birthday, Noah's birthday, the year the workshop was built. Nothing. Then she said quietly, "The year Noah died." The lock opened. For a moment, no one moved. Even Ranger went utterly still. The case did not reveal treasure, cash, or anything that belonged in stories people laughed about around diner counters. Inside lay a cracked phone sealed in plastic, 3 labeled chunks of concrete, a rust-darkened handgun wrapped in oilcloth, and an ID badge with a young man's face smiling out from beneath scratched laminate. Mara reached toward it, then stopped before touching. "Noah," she breathed. Ranger lowered his head and gave a soft, aching whine. It was not the sound he made for danger, it was the sound he made beside graves. And in that instant, Mara understood with a force that nearly buckled her knees. Her grandfather had not buried madness beneath the workshop floor. He had buried his son's last unfinished plea. The phone was old, but not hopeless. Ethan did not try to power it on immediately. He had learned enough from communications technicians to know that old devices could fail forever if handled carelessly. Instead, he photographed everything in place, documented the box, the cavity, the tape, the objects, the labels. Mara stood silent beside him, tears running now without apology. "He kept it," she said. "All these years." He protected it. The difference mattered again. Ethan wrapped the phone in a clean cloth and placed it in a padded case from his truck. For the data, he needed someone better than himself. He called Cole Maddox just after sunset. Cole answered on the 4th ring with wind noise in the background and irritation already loaded in his voice. "If this is about helping you move heavy furniture, I retired from friendship." Ethan almost smiled. "I need a phone recovered." There was a pause. Cole Maddox knew Ethan well enough to hear the weight beneath the sentence. He was 34, a former Special Operations Technical Support Specialist, tall and sturdy, with short blonde-brown hair, pale blue eyes, and a thin scar through his left eyebrow that made his sarcasm look permanent. Cole had the kind of angular, weathered face that seemed built for bad coffee and worse decisions. He joked because silence made old memories too loud. "What kind of phone?" Cole asked. "Old. Sealed. Possible evidence." Another pause. Evidence of what? Ethan looked at Mara, then at Noah's badge beneath the work light. "Maybe murder." Cole stopped joking. "Send me pictures. Don't plug it into anything. Don't let local cops near it until I know what we're dealing with." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Why would you say that?" "Because you used the word local like it was already infected." Ethan sent the images. Cole called back 5 minutes later. "I can drive up tomorrow, but if there's a gun in that box, preserve it. Don't wipe it. Don't unload it unless you have to. Photograph the condition first." "I did." "Of course you did. You're annoyingly competent." "Cole." "Yeah?" "Come armed." Cole was silent for half a breath. "That bad?" Ethan looked toward the dark window. Snow reflected faintly in the glass. And beyond it, Pine Hollow Ridge looked peaceful enough to forgive every sin committed under its roofs. "Getting there." They ended the call. Mara sat on a stool near the workbench, staring at the ID badge. Noah Whitmore had been 29 when the photo was taken. Brown hair, open face, a smile that looked too unguarded for what had happened to him. He had the expression of someone who still believed truth naturally rose to the surface if a good person pointed toward it. Ethan hated that expression, not because it was weak, because the world punished it too often. "He was kind," Mara said. "That sounds small, but it wasn't. Noah was the kind of man who remembered what people were allergic to." He fixed the school's old boiler during Christmas break and never sent an invoice. He used to pretend not to let children win at chess, but he absolutely did. She wiped her face with both hands. "When he died, my grandfather said it wasn't an accident. Everyone thought grief had made him cruel, but maybe grief made him accurate." Ethan leaned against the workbench. "My last mission went bad because a building came down." The words surprised him. He had not meant to offer them. A teammate was trapped. We heard him for 9 minutes. Mara looked up slowly. Ethan kept his eyes on the steel box. 9 minutes is longer than people think. Ranger came to him then and pressed his shoulder against Ethan's leg. The contact was gentle, grounding. Ethan set his hand on the dog's head. "I couldn't get him out," he said. Mara did not answer with comfort. He was grateful for that. Some wounds did not want bandages made of words. Instead, she said, "Maybe that's why you saw this place clearly." Maybe. Or maybe broken men recognized broken structures because both learned how much weight could be carried before collapse. By 9, the workshop had gone dark except for 2 portable lamps. Ethan stored the steel box in a locked cabinet reinforced with a chain from his truck. It was temporary and not enough, but better than leaving it exposed. Mara finally prepared to leave, though every movement seemed reluctant. "You shouldn't stay alone," Ethan said. She gave a tired laugh. "I'm a school teacher with a Subaru. I don't think I'm their main problem." "Not funny." "No," she admitted. "Not really." He walked her to her car with Ranger at his side. The snow had hardened into glittering crust beneath their boots. The lake beyond the pines lay flat and pale beneath the moon. Before getting in, Mara looked back at the workshop. "I spent years being ashamed of him," she said. "Not because I didn't love him. Because loving him meant admitting the whole town might be wrong. That's a hard thing to admit. Harder when the town is all you have." She drove away slowly. Ethan watched her taillights vanish before returning inside. The attack came 27 minutes later. Ranger heard it first. His head snapped toward the rear bay door. Ethan killed the lamp immediately. Darkness swallowed the workshop. A metallic click sounded near the back entrance. Then a second. Someone working the lock. Ethan moved without haste. The old self rose inside him, not wild, not eager, cold, efficient. He hated how easily it still fit. The door opened 2 inches. A man slipped inside wearing a dark jacket and knit cap. Another followed, broader, carrying a duffel bag that sagged heavily in one hand. Gasoline. Ethan smelled it before he saw the container. The first man whispered, "Find the tube, east side." The second muttered, "Dane said burn it if we can't." Ethan's jaw tightened. They were not thieves. They were cleaners. Ranger disappeared into the dark like a shadow given teeth. The thin man reached the workbench and lifted his flashlight. Ethan struck first. He drove the man into the side of a tool cabinet hard enough to knock the breath out of him, twisted the wrist holding the flashlight, and dropped him to the floor. The second man spun, reaching into his coat, but Ranger hit him low from the left, jaws clamping around the padded sleeve and dragging him off balance. The duffel bag spilled. A red fuel can rolled across the concrete. The man cursed and kicked at Ranger. Ethan crossed the distance in 3 strides and brought a heavy wrench down against the man's forearm. Bone did not break, but the weapon fell. The thin man scrambled up and ran. Ethan lunged but caught only the edge of his jacket. Fabric tore. The man escaped through the rear door into the snow. The broader man tried to rise. Ranger stood over him, teeth bared, growl deep enough to vibrate through the floor. "Don't," Ethan said. The man obeyed. His name, according to the driver's license Ethan found, was Travis Mullen. Late 30s, heavy-faced, with patchy stubble and frightened eyes that did not match the violence he had brought with him. He smelled of cigarettes, sweat, and cheap aftershave. Ethan zip-tied his wrists with supplies from his emergency kit and searched the dropped bag. Fuel, rags, a lighter, and a handheld radio. Static hissed once. Then a voice spoke through it. "Report. Did you get the Eastern plans?" Ethan picked up the radio slowly. The voice continued, sharper now. "Mullen, answer me. Dane wants the hard copy before dawn." The workshop settled into silence. Ranger looked up at Ethan, amber eyes bright in the dark. Ethan did not answer the radio. He only stared at the eastern wall, then at the steel box locked away beneath the workbench, and understood that Noah Whitmore's death was no longer an old tragedy. It was active, breathing, hunting. And now it knew Ethan Calder had opened the floor. The man named Travis Mullen said almost nothing after the radio went silent. He sat zip-tied to an iron chair near the rear bay door, shoulders hunched, one sleeve torn where Ranger's teeth had pinned him without tearing deeper than necessary. The German Shepherd stood 10 feet away, still as a carved guardian, cream-gray fur catching the hard spill of the portable lamp. His amber eyes did not leave Travis for more than a few seconds at a time. Ethan Calder had seen fear in many forms. Battlefield fear came loud, full of shouting, begging, anger, prayer. Civilian fear was quieter. It hid behind excuses. It looked at doors. It licked cracked lips. Travis had the second kind. "You came for the Eastern plans," Ethan said. Travis stared at the concrete floor. "You brought gasoline," Ethan continued. "That means you were told to destroy whatever you couldn't carry." Travis swallowed. Ethan crouched in front of him. His old military-gray tactical shirt was dusted white from concrete, the frayed cuffs darkened by oil. He looked tired, but not uncertain. His clean-shaven face held that disciplined stillness men mistook for calm until they stood too close to it. "Here is what happens next," Ethan said. "You don't talk to me, fine. But you're going to sit there while I call someone who still believes in paperwork. And if your name shows up beside arson, breaking and entering, attempted destruction of evidence, and whatever Dane sent you to cover up, you'll wish you had chosen honesty before the morning got colder." Travis's eyes flicked up at the name Dane. There it was, small enough. Ethan did not call the Pine Hollow Ridge Sheriff's Office. Not yet. Noah Whitmore's last warning still echoed in the room. Don't trust the sheriff. Instead, he called Mara first. She arrived 20 minutes later, her old blue Subaru sliding through snow at the gate. She had thrown her blue-gray wool coat over what looked like pajamas and winter boots. Her chestnut hair was loose now, falling around her pale face in wind-tangled strands. Fear had sharpened her, but it had not made her helpless. When she saw Travis and the fuel can, her hand went to her mouth. "They were going to burn it." "Not if they found what they wanted first," Ethan said. Mara looked toward the eastern wall. The workshop seemed to look back. Cole Maddox arrived before dawn in a black pickup with mountain tires and a cracked windshield. He stepped out carrying a hard equipment case in one hand and a paper bag of gas station breakfast sandwiches in the other, as if crime scenes and bad food belonged naturally together. Cole was 34, tall and solid through the shoulders, with short blonde-brown hair flattened by a winter cap and pale blue eyes that missed very little. The thin scar through his left eyebrow gave his face a permanently skeptical tilt, which suited him. He wore a dark moss-green tactical winter jacket over layered black clothing, dark utility pants, gloves, and battered boots that had clearly survived more than one country. He took one look at Travis and sighed. "Ethan, when normal people buy property, they find termites." "Good morning to you, too." Cole handed Mara the paper bag. "You look like someone who needs a terrible sandwich." Despite everything, Mara let out one broken laugh. It helped. Only a little, but enough. Cole examined the steel box, the old phone, the concrete samples, the gun, and the documentation Ethan had taken. His joking faded piece by piece. By the time he reached Noah's ID badge, his expression had turned grim. "This isn't random," Cole said. "No. And you didn't call local law?" "No." Cole nodded slowly. "That probably saved your evidence." They secured Travis in the rear office, where Ranger could watch the door from the hall. Ethan photographed the fuel can, the radio, the dropped lighter, the torn jacket fabric from the escaped intruder. Cole made copies of the photos to 2 separate encrypted drives. Mara wrote down every word she remembered Victor Dane saying earlier that day. By sunrise, the 3 of them stood before the eastern wall. The missing space no longer felt theoretical. It felt like a heart beating behind steel. Ethan ran his gloved hand along the seam they had found near the base. Jonas didn't want this opened casually. Cole knelt and aimed a small inspection camera into the narrow airflow gap. The screen showed darkness at first, then a flash of metal framing. "There's a cavity," Cole said. "Wider than a utility chase. Maybe a narrow room." Mara's face tightened. "He built a room inside the wall." "Looks like it." Ethan looked at her. "If we open it, there may be things you don't want to see." Mara's eyes glistened, but her voice did not break. "I already spent 8 years not seeing." That settled it. They did not attack the wall with a sledgehammer. Jonas had been too careful for that. Cole traced the hidden fasteners with a stud finder and a magnet. Ethan removed a section of interior paneling piece by piece, revealing steel bracing behind it. The workmanship was astonishing. The false wall was not crude concealment. It was architecture with a secret pulse. Behind one vertical brace, Ethan found a recessed latch so perfectly disguised beneath paint and dust that even his fingers nearly missed it. He pressed. Something clicked inside the wall. Mara stopped breathing. A narrow panel released with a soft sigh, like the building had been holding air in its lungs for years. Cold darkness opened before them. Ranger moved first. He stepped toward the gap, ears forward, body low but not afraid. Then he paused and looked back at Ethan. Permission. Ethan gave one quiet command. "Easy." The dog entered. They waited. No growl. No bark. Only the faint scrape of paws on hidden flooring. Then Ranger gave one soft whine. Ethan switched on his flashlight and followed. The room was narrow, barely wide enough for a man to walk sideways in places, but it extended nearly the full length of the eastern wall. The air smelled dry, metallic, faintly of old paper and cedar. Jonas had built ventilation into the structure, hidden behind exterior louvers. Moisture packets lined shelves. Fireproof panels covered the interior. Every detail showed purpose. This was not a panic room. This was a vault. A vault made by a grieving father who understood buildings better than he trusted men. Shelves lined both sides, Metal tubes held rolled drawings. Plastic evidence bins were labeled in precise handwriting. A small desk sat at the far end beneath a battery-powered lamp long dead. Above it hung photographs. Noah Whitmore in a yellow construction jacket, smiling beside Jonas. Noah as a child holding a wooden toy boat. Noah and Mara as teenagers, covered in sawdust, laughing in front of the same workshop. Mara stepped inside and made a sound so small, Ethan almost wished he had not heard it. "My God." Her fingers hovered near the photographs, afraid to touch them, afraid not to. Ranger crossed to the far end of the hidden room and sat beneath the wall of photographs. Then, with a gentleness that did not belong to a war dog and yet somehow belonged entirely to him, he lowered his head onto a pair of old leather work gloves resting beneath Noah's picture. The gloves were cracked, stained with pencil graphite and sawdust, shaped forever by the hands of a man who had built things to keep other people safe. Mara covered her mouth, tears slipping through her fingers. Ethan felt the room change. Not in any supernatural way. No ghost appeared, no voice spoke. But for one breath, the room felt less like storage and more like a chapel. Jonas Whitmore had not built an altar of candles or stone. He had built one of blueprints, evidence, and a father's refusal to let his son vanish into a lie. And Ranger, who knew nothing of courtrooms or corruption, had found the place where grief had been kneeling for 8 years. Mara finally touched the edge of Noah's photograph. "I'm sorry," she whispered. No one asked whether she was speaking to Noah or Jonas. Perhaps both. Cole broke the silence carefully. "You need to see this." He had opened one of the labeled bins. Inside were printed emails, invoices, purchase orders, and material certifications. Each stack was marked by date. Haven Ridge Winter Bridge, original steel specification, substituted material shipment, inspection override, emergency load warning. Ethan lifted a folder and scanned the contents. He understood enough construction language from operational planning to know the meaning, even if not every technical detail. Steel, rated for one load, had been replaced by cheaper material. Concrete mix ratios had been altered. Inspection results had been copied, edited, and refiled. Cole held up a printed email with highlighted sections. Dane's company knew the substitutions failed load requirements. Mara stared. "Then why keep building?" "Money," Cole said. "Usually wears a nicer coat than murder, but they're cousins." Ethan moved to the desk. A cassette recorder sat there beside a sealed envelope labeled, "If I do not outlive the lie." Mara flinched at the words. Ethan looked to her. "Your call." She took several breaths before nodding. Cole found a compatible player in one of Jonas's bins, because Jonas, apparently, had prepared for even that. The machine clicked, hissed, and then an old man's voice filled the hidden room. Jonas Whitmore's voice was rough, low, and exhausted. "If anyone hears this, then I failed to deliver the evidence myself. My name is Jonas Elias Whitmore. My son, Noah, did not die because a scaffold failed. The scaffold failed because men made sure it would." Noah discovered material fraud in the Haven Ridge Winter Bridge project. He told me he had proof that Victor Dane authorized substitutions after engineers warned the structure would not survive repeated winter load. Mara pressed her fist against her chest. The tape continued. "I went to Sheriff Harold Keene. Within 2 days, the samples Noah collected disappeared. A witness changed his statement. Dane's attorney called me by a name only Noah used in private notes. That was when I understood they had reached inside the investigation before it had even begun." Ethan's jaw tightened. Jonas coughed on the tape, then continued. They called me unstable. Maybe I was. A man should be allowed some instability after lowering his son into the ground. But grief did not make me wrong. The room seemed to deepen around the words. I have hidden copies of everything here. Drawings, invoices, recordings, material samples, names. I have not gone public because I believe Dane would burn this town to save himself. I need the evidence to survive longer than I do. If you found this room, do not trust the first badge you see. Find someone outside their reach, and for God's sake, stop that bridge before a winter storm turns theft into a massacre. The tape clicked off. For a long time, none of them moved. Mara sat slowly on the floor, right there among the evidence bins, as if her legs had simply stopped negotiating with the rest of her. He knew, she said. He knew people would die. Ethan looked at the shelves, the labels, the quiet discipline of a man preserving truth piece by piece, while everyone called him broken. He stayed alive long enough to build this, and died with everyone thinking he was crazy. Ethan thought of the old woman at the auction. Jonas Whitmore was a good man before grief got him. No, grief had not gotten him. Grief had armed him with patience. Cole began cataloging the room. He worked fast, photographing every shelf before touching anything, muttering file names under his breath. Mara recovered enough to help identify family handwriting, Jonas's marks, old dates, Noah's initials. Ethan stood near the entrance with Ranger, watching the workshop beyond the secret door. The building was no longer quiet. Outside, morning had grown bright, almost cruelly beautiful. Snow on the lake glittered like powdered glass. A town went about its day beyond the trees, unaware that the old workshop had opened its ribs and revealed a buried heart. Mara found another folder near the desk. This is about the community shelter, she said. Ethan turned. The folder contained photographs of people inside the workshop during winter storms. Elderly couples wrapped in blankets, children sleeping on folded coats, a young mother holding a baby near a portable heater. Jonas appeared in several images, white hair wild, flannel sleeves rolled up, serving coffee from a metal pot. He let people stay here, Mara said. I remember some of this, but not all. Her voice softened. There was one storm when I was 12. Power went out for 3 days. Grandpa opened the workshop and cooked soup on camping stoves. He told us buildings were only useful if they knew how to become a harbor. Ethan looked around the hidden room. A harbor, a tomb, a witness stand. Jonas had made the workshop all three. Near mid-morning, Cole held up a hard drive sealed inside a fireproof pouch. This may be the motherlode. Project files, backups, maybe accounting. Can you open it? Maybe. Not here. Not on anything connected to the internet. Ethan nodded. Mara wiped her face and stood. Something had changed in her posture. The guilt was still there, but beneath it now stood anger. And beneath anger, something older. Loyalty returning to its rightful throne. What do we do first? She asked. We preserve everything, Ethan said. Then we find someone Dane doesn't own. Cole glanced toward Travis, locked in the rear office. And we assume the guy who ran last night is already talking. Ethan looked toward the open bay, where cold sunlight cut across the concrete floor. Victor Dane would know soon. Maybe already did. But the secret had changed hands now. For 8 years, Jonas had carried it alone inside walls he built with grief, mathematics, and love. Now it belonged to the living, to a granddaughter who had come back,
to an old war dog who had listened where people had mocked, to a soldier who had bought a workshop hoping to escape collapse and found instead a structure built to resist it. Ethan rested one hand against the hidden doorframe. He had come to Pine Hollow Ridge to rebuild engines, boats, maybe himself. Instead, he had found a dead man's final command: stop that bridge. And somewhere deep in the workshop, beneath steel and sawdust and the breath of a loyal dog, the truth was no longer buried.
It was awake. By noon, Pine Hollow Ridge had begun doing what small towns did best when danger wore a respectable coat. It whispered. Ethan Calder felt it before anyone said anything directly. A truck slowed too long outside the Whitmore workshop. A woman at the hardware store avoided his eyes after recognizing him. Two men near the gas station stopped talking when his dark green pickup rolled past, their breath rising in pale clouds like smoke signals they wished the wind would erase. Victor Dane had not sent men with gasoline again. Not yet. He had sent something cleaner. Suspicion. Ethan stood in the main bay of the workshop with his phone in one hand and a county inspection notice in the other. The paper had been taped to the gate sometime before sunrise. It claimed anonymous concerns had been raised about unsafe renovation, improper electrical work, structural risk, and possible unlawful storage of hazardous materials. Cole Maddox read it over Ethan's shoulder and gave a humorless laugh. "Congratulations. You've owned the place for 2 days and already become a public menace." Ethan folded the notice once, slowly. "Fast work." Dane's kind of people don't throw punches until paperwork fails. Across the room, Mara Bellamy sat at the old drafting table with Jonas Whitmore's files spread before her. She had tied her chestnut hair back again, but loose strands kept escaping around her pale face. Exhaustion lived beneath her eyes, yet something steadier had entered her since the hidden room opened. Grief had bent her, but truth was beginning to straighten her spine. "They'll say Grandpa altered everything," she said. "They'll say Ethan damaged the building. They'll say we planted whatever we found." Cole tapped one finger against the notice. "Which is why we stop touching original evidence unless we're documenting it." "I know someone," Mara said. Ethan looked at her. "Clara Whitcomb, attorney, works 2 towns over in North Ashford." She used to ask questions after Noah died, but no one would talk. Grandpa trusted her once. Mara swallowed. "I didn't. I thought she was stirring pain back up." "And now?" "Now I think pain was already there. We were just polite enough to let it rot." They decided to move copies first, not originals. Cole spent hours creating encrypted duplicates of photographs, scans, audio, and digital images of the documents. The old hard drive remained sealed. The phone remained untouched except for external preservation. The samples stayed labeled inside a locked cabinet Ethan reinforced with a steel chain and a motion sensor from his truck. Ranger remained near the open bay door, his cream-gray body motionless beneath the winter light. He watched every passing vehicle with quiet, amber-eyed judgment. At 3 in the afternoon, the first inspector arrived. He was a heavy man in his 50s, with a red nose, watery eyes, and a county jacket stretched tight across his belly. His name badge read Blevins. He carried a clipboard like it was a shield and avoided looking at Ranger. "Got reports," he said. "Of what exactly?" Ethan asked. "Unsafe conditions. You want to inspect. Blevins seemed disappointed by the lack of argument. He walked the property with exaggerated seriousness, marking things that had clearly been broken before Ethan bought the workshop. Old wiring, rusted gutter brackets, a cracked exterior step. He frowned hardest near the eastern wall, but did not know what he was looking at. That made Ethan certain someone had told him to pay attention to it, without explaining why. When Blevins left, he handed Ethan a temporary work restriction. No active renovation until review. Cole watched the county truck disappear. That's not law enforcement. That's a leash. Ethan folded the paper and put it in his pocket. I've worn worse. The next blow came before sunset. A local social media post accused Ethan of being an unstable former soldier who had threatened workers and kept weapons and attack dogs inside the old Whitmore building. By dinner, the story had changed 3 times. By nightfall, someone claimed Ethan had assaulted a county official. Someone else said Mara had been brainwashed by a drifter. Someone mentioned Jonas Whitmore's name with the old cruel softness people used for the dead they had failed. Mara read the comments on her phone until her hands shook. Ethan took the phone gently and placed it face down on the table. Don't drink poison just because someone handed you a cup. Her laugh broke halfway. Did they teach you that in SEAL training? No. Diner waitress in Missouri. Cole nodded. Wise order. Comes with fries. For one breath, the 3 of them smiled. Then headlights swept across the snow outside. Ranger stood. A patrol SUV stopped near the gate. The man who stepped out was young, maybe 28 or 29, tall but not yet filled into his height, with sandy brown hair tucked beneath a winter deputy cap. His face was broad and earnest, reddened by cold, the kind of face that would have looked boyish if his eyes were not so tired. He wore a newer dark blue winter sheriff uniform under a thick badge jacket, black snow boots, leather gloves, and a shoulder radio that crackled softly in the evening air. He raised both hands slightly when Ranger's growl rolled across the yard. "Easy," he called. "I'm not here for trouble." Ethan stepped outside. "Then you're ahead of schedule for this town." The deputy gave a small, nervous smile. "Owen Rusk, deputy sheriff." Mara came to the doorway. "Owen?" His expression softened with recognition. "Hey, Mara." She looked uncertain. "You still work for Keene's department?" "Sheriff Keene retired 3 years ago." Owen's jaw tightened. But some of his friends didn't. That was the first honest thing anyone in a uniform had said since Ethan arrived. Ranger stopped growling. He moved forward slowly, snow whispering under his paws, and sniffed Owen's gloved hand. The young deputy did not flinch, though his throat worked once. Ranger circled him, then pressed his nose against the left pocket of Owen's jacket. Owen's eyes flicked down. With careful fingers, he pulled out a small wooden keychain shaped like a pine tree, worn smooth from years of handling. Mara inhaled sharply. "My grandfather made those," she said. Owen looked at the keychain as if it had suddenly become heavier than metal. "He fixed our roof after the 2009 storm," he said quietly. "My mom tried to pay him. He told her to make soup for someone colder than us." His voice roughened. "I was 12. I never forgot." Ranger sat at Owen's feet, not fully trusting, but no longer warning. And Ethan, watching the dog's decision, felt the first thin thread of possibility in a town that had spent years tying knots around the truth. Inside the workshop, Owen refused coffee but accepted a chair. He spoke carefully at first, then faster once he realized Ethan was not asking him to betray the law, only corruption. "I can't take custody of evidence," he said. "Not officially. Not unless it goes through the department. And I'm telling you plainly, don't do that yet." "Why?" Cole asked. Owen looked at Mara. "Because anything tied to Harold Keene still has roots. Victor Dane funded half the county's emergency equipment after the bridge project started. People owe favors. People pretend favors aren't chains."
Ethan crossed his arms. "Can you get us to state investigators?" "Maybe, but you need an attorney first, someone who can force clean procedure." "Clara Whitcomb," Mara said. Owen nodded. "Good. Dane hates her." "That's almost a reference letter," Cole said.
Owen also gave them another name, Lila Mercer. "She runs the Ridge Diner," he said. "If anyone saw something the night Noah died, it's Lila. She sees everything from that counter and says almost nothing until she's ready." They went to the diner after dark, not together. Cole stayed behind with Ranger and the evidence copies. Ethan and Mara drove separately in case they were being followed. The Ridge Diner sat near the old mill road, glowing warm against the snow with red vinyl booths and fogged windows. Inside smelled of coffee, frying onions, maple syrup, and old wood. The woman behind the counter was in her mid-50s, sturdy rather than heavy, with copper-brown hair pinned back loosely, and a face made handsome by endurance instead of softness. Her eyes were quick, dark hazel, and too sharp for anyone hoping to lie comfortably. She wore a moss-green sweater beneath a brown apron and moved with the authority of someone who had owned both grief and a cash register for a long time. Lila Mercer looked at Mara first, then Ethan, then the street outside. "Took you long enough," she said. Mara's voice was barely above a whisper. "You knew?" Lila poured 2 coffees without asking. "I knew Jonas wasn't crazy. Knowing and proving are 2 different animals." She leaned both hands on the counter. "The night Noah died, Victor Dane's black SUV was near the Haven Ridge site. Not parked at the entrance, back service road. I saw it when I was driving home from my sister's." "Did you tell anyone?" Ethan asked. "I told Keen." Silence. Lila's mouth twisted. "Next morning, he asked if I was sure I hadn't seen a county utility vehicle. Then my diner failed a health inspection for a cracked tile under the dishwasher." Her eyes hardened. "My husband had died the year before. I had 2 loans and a walk-in freezer older than my patience." I shut up. Mara reached across the counter and took her hand. Lila looked away quickly, ashamed of tears before they formed. "Jonas fixed my roof after Frank died," she said. "Wouldn't take money. Said houses leak worse when women are grieving." A small laugh escaped her, broken and warm. "Old fool. Kindest man I knew." She gave them what she had, an old written note she had made after seeing the SUV, dated the next morning, folded inside a recipe book for 8 years. It was not enough alone, but with everything else, it mattered. At 8:40 p.m., Ethan and Mara left for North Ashford to meet Clara Whitcomb. The road cut through black pines and low hills. Snow began falling again, light at first, then thicker. Ethan drove ahead with the evidence copies in a sealed case under the passenger seat. Mara followed in her Subaru 20 yards behind. Halfway through the ridge pass, headlights appeared too fast behind them. Ethan saw them in the mirror. 1 vehicle. No, 2. His body went cold in the old, familiar way. He called Mara. "Stay back." "If I tell you to stop, stop." "What is it?" "Company." A dark pickup surged forward and clipped the rear quarter of Ethan's truck. Metal screamed. Ethan corrected instantly, tires sliding before catching. The second vehicle moved to box Mara in, but she hit her brakes hard, fishtailed, and stopped short behind a snowbank. Good. The first pickup rammed Ethan again. Ranger was not with him. For 1 sharp second, Ethan hated that. Then he remembered Ranger was guarding the originals with Cole, exactly where he needed to be. The truck hit a 3rd time. Ethan let the impact push him, then used the curve. He braked late, swung wide, and forced the attacker past him toward the shoulder. The dark pickup slid sideways, smashed through a wooden road marker, and stopped nose first in a ditch. Ethan was out before the other driver recovered. A man stumbled from the pickup with a handgun rising in one shaking grip. Ethan closed the distance before the barrel leveled. He drove the man's wrist upward, slammed him against the hood, stripped the weapon, and pinned him face down in the snow. The second vehicle fled before Mara could read the plate. Ethan zip-tied the attacker with emergency restraints from his glove box, breathing hard but steady. His hands remembered everything. That was the part he hated. Violence returned like an old dog that still knew the porch. Mara ran toward him through the snow. "Ethan!" "I'm fine." "You're bleeding." He touched his cheek. A shallow cut. Nothing. The man beneath him groaned. Mara stared at the gun in Ethan's hand, then at his face. She did not look afraid of him. That mattered more than he expected. "I didn't come here for this," Ethan said quietly. "I know. I came here to stop fighting." Mara looked down the dark road where the second vehicle had vanished. "Maybe this isn't the same thing." Ethan turned toward her. Her voice trembled, but her eyes held. "Maybe this time you're not fighting because someone ordered you to. Maybe you're fighting because someone tried to bury the truth under good people." Snow fell between them, soft as ash, bright as feathers. Ethan looked at the sealed evidence case inside his damaged truck, then at the road ahead toward North Ashford, then back toward Pine Hollow Ridge, where Cole and Ranger guarded the old workshop like sentries before a sleeping king. He lowered the stolen gun and emptied the chamber. "We keep moving," he said. Mara nodded. Behind them, the attacker cursed into the snow. Ahead, beyond the dark ridge, Clara Whitcomb waited. And Victor Dane had just made his first real mistake. He had mistaken Ethan Calder's desire for peace as a lack of teeth. Clara Whitcomb's office sat above a closed pharmacy in North Ashford, behind a narrow staircase that smelled of old varnish, paper dust, and the kind of coffee people drank because sleep had become optional. Ethan Calder reached the building with blood drying along one cheek, a dented truck, and a man zip-tied in the bed beneath an emergency blanket. Mara Bellamy followed in her Subaru, pale but steady, her hands still trembling from the Ridge Road ambush. Clara opened the door before they knocked. She was in her early 40s, tall and lean, with dark brown hair pulled into a low knot, and sharp brown eyes that seemed to read consequences before people finished speaking. Her face was narrow, intelligent, and tired in the way of someone who had spent years watching truth lose to money by inches. She wore a charcoal wool coat over a navy suit, white shirt, practical winter boots, and a thin silver watch. No jewelry beyond that. Nothing decorative. Everything purposeful. Her gaze moved from Ethan's cut cheek to Mara's shaken face, then to the restrained attacker in the truck. "Tell me he isn't dead," Clara said. "He isn't," Ethan answered. "Good. Dead men complicate affidavits." Cole Maddox would have liked her immediately. Within 20 minutes, Clara had called state police contacts instead of the local sheriff's office. Within 40, 2 state troopers had taken custody of the attacker and the weapon, with Clara standing close enough to make every word procedural. She gave them copies, not originals. She controlled the chain of custody like a priestess guarding holy fire. Only after the troopers left did she let Ethan and Mara into her office. The room was small but ordered, with almost military discipline. Legal books lined one wall. Case files sat in squared stacks. A framed newspaper clipping about a construction fraud case hung behind her desk. Not as decoration, Ethan thought, but as a reminder that monsters sometimes wore permits instead of masks. Clara listened. She did not interrupt when Mara spoke of Jonas. She did not soften when Ethan described the hidden room. She did not look surprised when Victor Dane's name entered the story. Her face simply grew stiller, as if an old suspicion had finally been given bones. "I knew Noah Whitmore was afraid before he died," Clara said at last. Mara looked up sharply. "You knew him?" "I knew of him. He came to me once. Not formally. He asked what kind of proof someone would need if a public works project had been compromised." Clara leaned back, eyes narrowing at the memory. "He was polite. Too polite for a man that frightened. I told him documentation, samples, financial records, witness testimony. He said he might have some of that soon. And then he died," Mara whispered. "Yes." Clara's mouth tightened. "And then everyone became very eager to tell me grief had made Jonas unreliable." They spent the next 2 hours reviewing what Cole had copied. The video from Noah's phone still needed recovery, but the photographs of the steel box, the concrete samples, Jonas's tape transcript, the invoices, the substituted material records, Lila Mercer's dated note, and the radio recording from the intruders formed a skeleton strong enough to stand. Clara's verdict was quiet. "This is not just a cold case anymore. It is an active public safety threat." Ethan looked toward the window. Snow had begun falling harder beyond the glass. "The bridge." Clara nodded. "Haven Ridge Winter Bridge is scheduled for ceremonial opening tomorrow morning before the storm closure. Dane moved the schedule forward 2 weeks. Mara's face drained. "Why?" "Investment release," Clara said. "The Regional Development Fund pays out after official operational status. Once the bridge is declared open, Dane can secure funds, transfer liability, and bury objections in litigation for years." Ethan's hands closed slowly. "So if the bridge fails after opening..." "People die," Clara said, "and everyone argues over blame while Dane's money is already gone." The office seemed smaller then. Outside, a plow scraped along the street below with a long, metallic groan. Ethan heard it as a bridge beam under strain, a memory from a collapsing building, a teammate's voice beneath dust. He pushed the sound away. "Not now." Clara stood. "I can file an emergency injunction, but Dane has friends in county offices. If the state judge doesn't see enough urgency tonight, that ceremony may still happen." "We need the original project server," Ethan said. Clara stared at him. "Cole said there may be a server at the construction office," Mara added. "The working files, the versions before they were altered." Clara's eyes flicked between them. "You are not breaking into an active construction site." Ethan said nothing. Clara closed her eyes briefly. "That silence is deeply unhelpful." Then Ethan's phone rang. Cole. His voice came tight through the speaker. "We opened the hard drive in an isolated setup. Ethan, the project files are there, but incomplete. Jonas had enough to prove fraud, not enough to prove the bridge's current load status after the last modification." "What do you need?" "The site server, or the inspection laptop they use at Haven Ridge. There's a live structural assessment folder referenced in the file tree. If that folder shows they ignored a red failure report, it ends this tonight." Clara heard everything. Her expression shifted from objection to calculation. "Where is the server?" she asked. "Haven Ridge site office," Cole said. "North end of the bridge." Ethan looked at Mara. She already knew. Snow thickened against Clara's window, feather after feather, as if the sky was trying to bury the town before men finished their lies. Clara spread Jonas's original bridge drawing across her desk. Mara touched one corner of the paper and suddenly went very still. "What?" Ethan asked. Mara traced a tiny mark near the north support tower, almost hidden inside the architect's notation. It was not an engineering symbol. It was a small, hand-drawn pine tree, the same shape as Owen Rusk's keychain. "My grandfather marked safe access points this way," Mara whispered. "For emergency crews. For storms." Clara leaned closer. "That access corridor still exists?" Mara looked at the drawing, then at Ethan. "If Dane's crew didn't seal it, there's a maintenance passage under the north approach." Grandpa built it so rescuers could reach the bridge when the road iced over. For one breath, the dead architect seemed to reach across the years again, not with a ghostly hand, but with ink, patience, and the stubborn love of a man who had known winter would test everything. Ethan looked at the tiny pine tree. Jonas had not only hidden evidence, he had left them a door. They moved before the storm became impossible. Cole drove from the workshop with Ranger beside him and the originals secured in a hidden lockbox beneath the truck floor. The German Shepherd sprang down when they met at an old turnout near Haven Ridge, snow clinging to his cream-gray coat, amber eyes bright in the headlight wash. He greeted Ethan with one hard press of shoulder to thigh, then immediately turned toward the bridge site, as if the night itself had a scent. Deputy Owen Rusk arrived last in his patrol SUV, lights off. He wore his dark blue sheriff jacket, but the badge looked heavier on him now. "I checked dispatch," Owen said. "County security is already at the site. Officially because of weather. Unofficially because Dane knows someone's coming." Clara had stayed behind to file the emergency injunction and keep state contacts ready. Her final instruction had been simple: get the files without getting dead. Cole had responded, "That's our brand." Nobody laughed much. The Haven Ridge Winter Bridge rose from the storm like a half-awakened giant. Steel towers vanished into blowing snow. Floodlights carved white cones through the dark. The frozen lake below groaned under shifting wind. The bridge was beautiful from a distance, all clean lines and public promise. Up close, Ethan saw shortcuts, temporary weld covers, unsealed joints, cheap paneling hiding structural seams. He had not designed bridges, but he had moved through enough broken places to recognize arrogance disguised as completion. Mara stood beside him in her blue-gray coat, scarf whipping across her cheek. Fear lived plainly in her face now, but she did not turn away. "This was supposed to save people," she said. "It still can," Ethan answered, "if we stop it from opening." Owen led them to the maintenance access marked on Jonas's drawing. A snowbank hid the lower hatch near the north approach. Cole cleared it with a folding shovel while Rangers sniffed along the metal edge. The hatch was iced over, but not welded shut. Jonas's door had survived. Inside, the passage was low, narrow, and bitterly cold. Ethan went first, then Ranger, then Mara, Cole, and Owen. Their lights cut through dust and frost. Steel hummed faintly around them, wind vibrating the bridge above like a faraway animal growling in sleep. They reached a service stair below the site office. Voices overhead. 2 men. Ethan signaled everyone still. The old rhythm returned. Not bloodlust, not panic. Precision. The terrible grace of knowing exactly where to place a foot, when to breathe, when not to. He climbed first. A guard stepped through the doorway above, looking at his phone. Ethan pulled him down before the man made a sound, pinned him, disarmed him, and zip-tied his wrists. Ranger stopped the second guard at the landing with a deep growl that froze the man's courage in place. Owen took the man's radio. "No heroics," Owen whispered. The man nodded so fast his cap nearly fell off. The site office was a modular trailer bolted to temporary pilings beside the north span. Inside, fluorescent lights flickered over desks, safety posters, coffee cups, and a locked server cabinet. Cole went to work. "Give me 4 minutes." "You have 2, Ethan said. "Then I'll perform a miracle under protest." Mara stood near the window, watching floodlights blur in the storm. Suddenly, she stiffened. "Victor." A convoy of headlights moved toward the south approach. Black SUV. 2 pickups. Dane was coming. Cole muttered curses at the server cabinet. Owen radioed false status to buy time, his voice shaking only once. Ranger's ears flattened. Ethan checked the confiscated pistol, but kept it low. He had promised himself peace. The night had not promised it back. The server unlocked with a soft beep. Cole connected a drive. Progress bar. 20%. Wind slammed the trailer wall. 40. Headlights stopped outside. Victor Dane entered like he owned the storm. He stepped into the trailer in his charcoal coat and black gloves, snow melting on his shoulders. His gray-black hair remained almost perfect, which somehow made him more obscene. Behind him stood 2 security men. His eyes found Ethan, then Mara, then the cable running from the server. For the first time since Ethan had met him, Victor Dane did not smile. "You should have taken the money," Victor said. Ethan stepped between him and Cole. "You should have built the bridge right." Dane's gaze sharpened. "You have no idea what it takes to build anything in the real world." Mara moved forward. Her voice was quiet but clear. "My grandfather did." Victor looked at her with contempt wrapped in elegance. "Your grandfather died a bitter old man talking to walls." "No," Mara said. "He built one that outlived you." The progress bar hit 86%. One of Dane's men reached inside his coat. Ranger launched. The trailer erupted. The dog hit the man at the shoulder, driving him into a desk. Owen tackled the second guard. Ethan closed with Victor as the older man swung a metal flashlight toward his head. It clipped Ethan's shoulder. Pain flashed white. Ethan drove Victor back into the filing cabinet, pinning him by the wrist. Victor fought like a man unused to being touched by consequences. Outside, someone shouted. Cole yelled, "Done!" The drive came free. At that exact moment, a sound rolled through the bridge. Deep, metallic, wrong. Everyone froze. A joint somewhere in the north span shrieked under storm load. Mara looked toward the window, horror rising. "The bridge." Ethan released Victor only long enough to shove him into Owen's control. "Cuff him." Owen did. For once, the young deputy's hands did not shake. Cole opened the downloaded folder on his laptop. A red-marked structural assessment filled the screen. Critical load failure under ice and wind conditions. Do not open. Signed, ignored, time-stamped. Dane's authorization attached. Cole stared at it. Got him. The emergency injunction hit minutes later through Clara, followed by state orders transmitted over Owen's radio. The bridge opening was suspended. State police units were inbound. County security, suddenly allergic to involvement, backed away from Dane as if corruption were contagious. Victor stood handcuffed in the flickering trailer light, coat torn, face pale with rage. Ethan looked at him and felt no triumph, only exhaustion. And something beneath it. Relief, maybe. Not complete, not clean, but real. Mara walked out into the storm and stood facing the dark span of Haven Ridge Bridge. Ethan followed, with Ranger at his side.
Snow blew across the unfinished road in white waves. The bridge groaned again, but this time no cars crossed it. No ambulance, no school bus, no family trying to outrun a blizzard. Not tonight. Mara closed her eyes. "Grandpa stopped it," she whispered. Ethan looked down at Ranger, whose fur was rimmed with snow, whose breathing was calm now, whose amber eyes watched the bridge as if he had personally forbidden it to fall. "No," Ethan said softly. "You helped him finish." Behind them, sirens approached through the storm. Red and blue lights flickered against the snow, turning the bridge, the lake, and the gathered figures into something almost mythic. A dead man's warning, a granddaughter's courage, a young deputy's conscience, a soldier's reluctant return to battle, and a dog who had followed truth by scent when humans had lost it by choice. The files were out. The bridge was closed, and Victor Dane, for the first time in years, had nowhere left to stand. By morning, the storm had passed over Pine Hollow Ridge and left the world washed clean. Snow covered the town in soft white layers, smoothing rooftops, fences, road signs, and the scarred edges of the unfinished Haven Ridge Bridge. Blackwater Lake lay beneath a pale sky, frozen and silent, as if it too had held its breath through the long night and only now dared to exhale. Ethan Calder stood outside the Whitmore workshop with one hand resting on Ranger's head. The German shepherd leaned against his leg, tired but watchful, cream-gray fur still carrying the faint scent of snow, steel, and smoke from the construction site. The black harness with dark red trim was scuffed now, dusted with dried salt and ice. Ranger's amber eyes followed the road, not because danger was still visible, but because years of work had taught him that evil rarely disappeared simply because one man was in handcuffs. Ethan understood that. Victor Dane had been taken by state police before dawn. His spotless coat had been torn at one shoulder, his hair finally disturbed, his face pale with the rage of a man who had spent too long believing the world was a building he owned. The server files were now with state investigators. Clara Whitcomb had already filed emergency motions, preservation requests, and enough legal paperwork to make corruption bleed slowly in daylight. The bridge was closed. No cars crossed it, no school bus, no ambulance, no family trying to outrun winter. For the first time since Ethan had bought the old workshop, the silence around it felt natural. Cole Maddox stood near the bay door, drinking coffee from a chipped mug he had found in Jonas's old cabinet. His dark, moss-green tactical jacket was half-zipped, and his blonde-brown hair stuck up in several directions from a sleepless night. The scar through his eyebrow made his tired expression look more sarcastic than it probably was. "Good news," Cole said. The state engineers confirmed the bridge would have failed under repeated ice load. Mara Bellamy closed her eyes. She stood beside the drafting table, wrapped in her blue-gray wool coat, chestnut hair tucked messily behind her ears. Exhaustion had hollowed her face, but not weakened it. Something in her had hardened overnight, not into bitterness, but into shape, like wet clay finally fired. "How soon would it have happened?" she asked. Cole looked at Ethan before answering. "Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but soon enough that luck would have been the only safety system." Mara opened her eyes and looked toward the hidden room behind the eastern wall. "My grandfather knew." Ethan nodded. He knew enough. That morning, Clara arrived with Deputy Owen Rusk and 2 state investigators. Owen looked different without the uncertainty that had followed him before. He still wore the dark blue winter deputy uniform and thick jacket, still had the young, earnest face reddened by cold, but the set of his shoulders had changed. A man was not always transformed by winning. Sometimes he was transformed by finally choosing which side of himself to obey. Clara entered the workshop like a woman walking into a courtroom built of steel beams and sawdust. She moved through the evidence with careful eyes, asking precise questions, giving clear instructions. She did not touch anything without gloves. She did not let anyone speak over Mara. She did not let the investigators dismiss Jonas as eccentric. Eccentric is when a man paints his mailbox purple, Clara said coolly. Jonas Whitmore built a concealed archive because local evidence disappeared after his son's death. Use accurate language. One investigator coughed and wrote that down. By afternoon, the first official statement went out.
The Haven Ridge Winter Bridge project was suspended pending structural review and criminal investigation. Victor Dane was being held on charges related to obstruction, conspiracy, evidence tampering, and public endangerment. More charges were expected. The death of Noah Whitmore was reopened, and Jonas Whitmore, once called unstable by people who preferred comfortable lies, became the man who had preserved evidence no one else had been brave enough to protect. The news moved through Pine Hollow Ridge faster than the storm had. People came first in pairs, then in clusters. They stopped outside the fence and stared at the workshop with the stunned shame of villagers realizing they had walked past a shrine for years and called it a ruin. Lila Mercer came near sunset carrying a pot of soup wrapped in towels. The diner owner looked smaller outside her counter, but not weaker. Her copper-brown hair had escaped its pins, and her moss-green sweater was dusted with flour from a kitchen she had clearly left in a hurry. She handed the soup to Mara without ceremony. "Your grandfather fed half this town once," Lila said. "Figured it was time someone returned the bowl." Mara's mouth trembled. "Thank you." Lila looked toward the hidden wall and wiped at one eye with the heel of her hand. "I should have spoken sooner." Mara shook her head. "You're speaking now." Sometimes redemption did not enter a room with trumpets. Sometimes it came carrying soup and shame, hoping there was still a chair left near the fire. Over the next weeks, Pine Hollow Ridge changed in small, visible ways. Sheriff Harold Keene's name surfaced in state filings. His old reports were reviewed. His property records were subpoenaed. Men who had laughed too loudly at Jonas began avoiding cameras. County officials who once praised Victor Dane as a visionary suddenly discovered urgent family matters out of town. The bridge remained closed beneath frost and investigation tape. Noah Whitmore's photograph appeared in the local paper, not as a victim of an unfortunate accident, but as an engineer who had tried to warm the town. Jonas's photograph appeared beside his, white-haired, stern-eyed, wearing a flannel shirt and standing in front of the old workshop with one hand on a workbench. The headline read, "Father and son warned of bridge danger years before scandal." Mara bought 3 copies and cried over all of them. On the day the state removed the last evidence crate from the hidden room, Ranger refused to leave the eastern wall. The investigators had packed the shelves, photographed the floor, sealed the files, and carried away the hard drives. The room that had once held Jonas's long vigil stood empty, except for dust, faint cedar scent, and the old leather gloves beneath Noah's photograph. Mara stepped inside to take the gloves down. Ranger blocked her gently, not with aggression, with insistence. Then he nosed one glove aside. Beneath it, tucked into a shallow groove in the desk, was a thin strip of folded drafting paper no one had seen before. Mara opened it with shaking hands. It was not evidence, not an accusation, not a technical note. It was a message in Jonas's handwriting. "If this room is empty when you find this, then the truth survived me. Do not make this place a tomb. Open the doors. Let people be warm here again." Mara pressed the paper to her chest and wept. Ethan looked away toward the open bay door, where winter sunlight spilled across the concrete floor like a blessing that had traveled years to arrive. Jonas had not asked to be remembered as a martyr. He had asked for the workshop to live. Spring came slowly to Pine Hollow Ridge. It began with dripping gutters, then gray slush, then the first stubborn green along the fence line. Ethan repaired the bay doors himself. He replaced cracked windows, rewired the main floor legally under Clara's watchful guidance, and rebuilt the office into a clean workspace with shelves, a desk, and enough coffee to keep Cole from accusing him of barbarism. The sign went up in April. Whitmore Calder Workshop. Repair, restoration, winter aid, training. Ethan had argued for something smaller. Mara had ignored him. "You bought the building," she said, "but he built the soul of it. Both names stay." So they stayed. The first paying job was a snowmobile engine from a man who apologized 3 times for believing the rumors. Ethan fixed it and charged him fairly, not cruelly. The first free job was Lila's diner generator, which Ethan repaired in one long evening while Ranger slept under the counter and accepted bacon like a retired king receiving tribute. The first student was a 17-year-old boy named Caleb Moss, thin, angry, and too quiet, with black hair falling into his eyes and hands that shook until Ethan gave them work. Caleb had once run errands for one of Dane's men. Not crimes worth prison, enough shame to ruin a young life if nobody offered a different trade. Ethan taught him how to sand a door frame until the grain rose smooth beneath his palm. "Patience," Ethan said. Caleb scowled. "It's just wood." "No, it's wood now. It becomes something else if you don't rush it." The boy looked at him as if that sentence had gone somewhere deeper than carpentry. By June, the workshop had become what Jonas had wanted again. A place where old men brought broken lawnmowers and stayed too long drinking coffee. A place where teenagers learned not every mistake had to become a future. A place where veterans from nearby counties came on Saturdays, saying they needed help with engines when what they really needed was to stand near someone who understood why fireworks made them flinch. Ethan never made them talk. He gave them tools. Sometimes that was kinder. Mara started an after-school design program in the old drafting corner. She taught children how to draw bridges that held, houses that breathed, shelters that welcomed the cold and did not fear it. She kept Jonas's pine tree symbol on the wall above the table. Clara visited once a month for free legal clinics, sitting beneath a sign Cole made that read, "World's least fun but most useful human." Clara pretended to hate it and never took it down. Owen stopped by after shifts, sometimes in uniform, sometimes not. The badge weighed differently now. He had testified against former Sheriff Keene, and though some in town resented him for it, more began to respect him quietly. Courage in a small town rarely arrived to applause. It usually arrived to silence, then grudging nods. Then one day someone left pie on your porch. And Ethan? Ethan slept better. Not perfectly. War did not leave a man like a guest with manners. It lingered in corners. It knocked pipes at night. It came back through certain sounds, certain smells, certain shadows under doors. But the workshop gave him work that did not end in ruin. Each repaired hinge, each rebuilt engine, each storm shutter installed for an old widow became a plank in the bridge he was building back toward himself. One evening, near the end of summer, Ethan stood in the open bay doorway while golden light spread across Blackwater Lake. Ranger lay beside him on an old canvas bed, harness off for once, paws twitching in sleep. The dog's muzzle had gone a little grayer. His ears still flicked toward every distant sound, but his body was relaxed in a way Ethan rarely saw. Mara came to stand beside them. In her hands was the framed message Jonas had left in the hidden room. They had mounted it near the eastern wall, behind glass, not as a warning, but as a promise. Do not make this place a tomb. Open the doors. Let people be warm here again. Mara looked around the workshop. The repaired benches, the clean tools, the teenagers laughing over a jammed mower, Lila dropping off pie, Owen arguing with Cole about coffee, Clara reviewing papers near the office window. He got what he wanted, she said softly. Ethan watched Ranger sigh in his sleep. Not all of it. Mara's eyes moved to him. Ethan nodded toward the wall where Noah's photograph now hung beside Jonas's. But enough to matter. The last light touched the old steel beams overhead, turning them briefly bronze, almost sacred. Once, Ethan had thought starting over meant finding a place quiet enough that the past could not follow. He had been wrong. The past always followed. But sometimes, if a man was willing to open the right wall, measure what others told him not to measure, and trust the dog who heard what silence carried, the past did not come only to haunt. Sometimes it came to hand him a set of keys. Sometimes it came with a dead architect's final wish. Sometimes it came as a workshop by a northern lake, full of broken things waiting to become useful again. Ethan rested his hand on Ranger's sleeping head. The dog opened one amber eye, gave him a look that seemed to say, "Finally, you understand," then went back to sleep. And for the first time in many years, Ethan Calder did not listen for war in the quiet. He listened to tools, to laughter, to the lake wind moving through open doors, to a life being rebuilt, one honest sound at a time. Sometimes God does not send the miracle as thunder in the sky. Sometimes He sends it as an old key, a forgotten room, a loyal dog who refuses to stop listening, and one tired soul brave enough to open the door. In everyday life, we may all carry broken places inside us, but this story reminds us that nothing honest is ever truly wasted. A painful past can become shelter. A hidden truth can become justice. A wounded heart can still become a home for others. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Leave a comment and tell us what part moved you most. And if you believe stories like this still matter, please subscribe to the channel and walk with us into the next one. May God bless you, protect your home, strengthen your heart, and guide you toward the truth meant for your life.